Once upon a time, a handful of years ago, Julie and I were living in Michigan, and it was mid-December. We had had a few days of snow, followed by a few days of rain, and I came out of the church office, and there sat my little red truck, very sad, dirty, and I decided that I was going to go across the street and get some gas and get a car wash. So I put a bunch of gas in the tank, paid the extra, $6 or $7 for a car wash, and pulled around like you do at the little not so great car wash at the gas station, right? And I pulled around, and it's wintertime and it's Michigan, right? So there, our car washes have doors on the ends to prevent the weather and the cold from freezing the pipes and everything else. So the door is down, and what you do is you pull your truck around and you punch in the number on your receipt from the gas pump. So I did. And the door went up. And inside was a little Chevy Blazer. The door on the other side was down. So I sat there with nothing happening. And after a couple moments, a hand came out of the window and did this, of the Blazer, right? And I sat there thinking, well, this is weird. And then a couple moments later, the hand came out and did this again. And Dudley Do-Right was in my brain and said, somebody needs help. So I got out of my truck and I made my way toward the car wash and was suddenly introduced to a new reality. Because when I went across the threshold of that door, I triggered the undercarriage jets that were designed under high pressure to wash the bottom of my dirty truck. Except they washed my undercarriage. I mean, like this. And the water hit my pants and my backside so hard that it came out of my nose. And I'm doing this, and it was over as soon as it started, right? So I made my way to the Blazer to find a lady. All I remember about her was brown hair and really bright red lipstick. And she's sitting in her car crying, laughing, because she had just seen everything that happened. And I'm soaking wet. My coat was dry because all the water went up underneath it. I was soaking wet underneath my coat. It took a while because she was laughing so hard, through tears, for her to say, hey, I was just sitting here. I got my car washed. The door wouldn't go up. So I was calling my friend. I was just talking to my friend. So we're not in trouble. We're not having an emergency. And I said, so the door won't go up? And she said, no, it won't go up. So I walked around the front of her truck and I triggered the door, which went up with a very loud noise. My adrenaline was already like to here, right? So it scared me so bad, I just pancaked myself on her hood, trying to duck out of the way of whatever was happening, which brought, again, severe laughter on her part. I mean, she was screaming, laughing, and I don't blame her a bit because it was hilarious. And so the door's up, she can pull in now, and so I went around to her window and said, Merry Christmas, and she said, I assure you, I will have a Merry Christmas. I don't know how many times that story got told during that Christmas season. I don't know if she was ever able to get through this story telling it because it was so funny. And I went into my code had been triggered, right? So this is not going to wash my truck. So I went into the gas station and said to the girl, I said, do you have security cameras in the car wash? And she said, no. And I said, well, you wish you did because something hilarious just happened. And she didn't think it was nearly as funny. She just wanted me to go away. So she gave me a new code, and I got my truck washed and got on with my life. I changed my clothes as soon as I got home because I was soaking wet. But the idea that in an instant, our reality can change, and suddenly we are somewhere where we did not expect to be, is what I wanted to talk to you about today. The book of John, the Gospel of John, chapter 3, describes Jesus and his disciples baptizing. The disciples baptized. Jesus didn't baptize anyone, but they were there baptizing. And John, Jesus' cousin, John the Baptist, was also in their area baptizing. And Jesus' disciples were baptizing more people than John's disciples, and that was drawing some attention from the Pharisees, and Jesus didn't want to deal with those people yet. So he said to his disciples, we're going to Galilee. From where they were up to Galilee was a walk of a couple days. Now, John chapter 4 is where we're going to be today, and if you'd like to open your Bible or your device there, that would be good. John chapter 4, verse 4 says Jesus had to go through Samaria. But Jesus didn't have to go through Samaria. The routes that the Jewish people would take around Samaria were well established. Jesus didn't have to go to Samaria. Now, the Samaritan people get kicked around a whole lot in the New Testament, right? And I want to take just a few moments today to give us some context of why this was a big deal. Why the conflict between the Samaritans and the Jews. So we have to go back to when Israel had a king, King Saul, King David, King Solomon, David's son. After the reign of King Solomon, the kingdom divided along political lines. So we had now two kingdoms, two countries. Israel to the north, Judah to the south. Israel was made up of 10 of the tribes of Israel. Judah had 2 of the tribes. And though God had warned them repeatedly to worship him alone, the people in the north followed the leadership of their kings and practiced the worship of pagan gods, meaning gods other than Yahweh. Yahweh, the God that Abraham called from Ur, the God of Isaac and Jacob, the God who spoke to Moses from the burning bush and brought his people out of slavery in Egypt. And God used the nation of Assyria as his instrument of judgment against the people of Israel. And the Assyrians came and they killed a lot of people, and they carted away thousands. Assyrian records that we have found says upwards of 30 and probably upwards of 60,000 people were taken out of there. So they effectively emptied the land of Israel. Now, while they're doing this, they're bringing in people from other lands they had conquered. And the very few Jewish people that stayed in this land of Israel, many of them migrated south and were absorbed into the tribes in Judah. Those that remained, those very few that remained, were absorbed into this new culture that was being built in the land formerly known as Israel. This happened about over the course of many, many years, about 750 years before Jesus was born. Now, the people of Judah also were eventually conquered, and some of them exiled as well, but they were not dissipated like the people of Israel. The tribes and the culture in Judah stayed pretty much intact. Now, there's a lot of things at work here. It's complicated. History's complicated. But one of the things that rose out of the Samaritan melting pot was a religious practice that was an imitation of the religion of the Jews. The Samaritans observed only the Torah, only the first 5 books of the Bible. No wisdom literature, no historical account of the kings, no prophets. The Samaritans built a temple on Mount Gerizim which mimicked the Jewish temple in Jerusalem. And then they did what any self-respecting, newly established cult would do. They claimed that they were the true people of God, based on the heritage of those that had remained in the land, and that everybody else had it wrong, and they had it right. This did not sit well with the Jews, Jesus' people. And they viewed those people to the north as mongrel half-breeds who had polluted their bloodlines. The Samaritans established a counterfeit worship of Yahweh. We could chase a lot of rabbit trails here, but just know this history. About 130 years before Jesus was born, a Jewish ruler and high priest took an army up to Samaria, went to Mount Gerizim, and destroyed the temple. This kind of thing is not quickly forgotten. Around the time of Jesus' birth, some Samaritans snuck into the temple in Jerusalem and scattered dead people's bones around the courtyards, defiling the temple and making it unclean. The animosity between the Jews and the Samaritans in Jesus' day was about claims to religious authority and the means by which people had access to God. This was not some petty racial thing. This was about religious authority. Which brings us back to John 4:4. Jesus had to go to Samaria. Jesus didn't have to go to Samaria unless it was by divine appointment. Jesus said, I am here to do the will of my Father who sent me. And there were things done in Samaria that only Jesus could do. So Jesus had to go to Samaria. So he went, John chapter 4. He went along with his disciples and came to the Samaritan town of Sychar in the middle of the day. Tired and footsore, Jesus sat down by the city's well while his disciples went to town to buy some food. And as Jesus was sitting there by himself in the middle of the day, a woman came to draw some water. A woman alone at a well in midday meant she didn't want to be around in the morning when the other women came, or in the evening when the men came to water the flocks. She was an outcast, avoiding contact with the members of her community. And here's my question. Who are the Samaritans, if not outcasts from the community? Then God in the flesh, Jesus, blew through every social convention. Men were never to be alone with women that were not their wife or a close relation. Jesus blew through that convention and stepped right into scandal when he looked at her and said, give me something to drink. Now, this woman probably knew something about scandal. After all, she was there in the middle of the day to draw water. And she was taken aback and maybe even a little offended. She said, why do you, a Jewish man, ask for something to drink from me, a Samaritan woman? Like the disciples, I kind of get frustrated with Jesus' cryptic responses. Do you ever get frustrated with Jesus' cryptic responses? But here we have another cryptic response. If you recognize God's gift and who is saying to you, give me some water to drink, you would be asking him and he would give you living water. This poor lady has come to get water. That's why she's at the well. She isn't interested in word games or riddles, and I can sense her frustration when she says, "Sir, you don't even have a bucket. And the well is deep. Where could you get this living water? You aren't greater than our father Jacob, are you?" Oh, here we're getting close. Jacob gave this well to us, and he drank from it himself, as did his sons and livestock. Now, the term living water that Jesus used was just about water that's moving, like from a spring or a creek. And the lady knew the story that her people had used to legitimize their claims of religious heritage. Our father, Jacob, of the father of the tribes of Israel, gave this well to us, probably meaning not you. The barriers that protected her reality were being reinforced. Jesus replied, anyone who drinks this water will soon be thirsty again. Everybody knows that. But those who drink the water I give them will never be thirsty again. It becomes a fresh, bubbling spring within them, giving them eternal life. Now we're talking. Now we're talking. Please, sir, give me this water. I'm tired of coming to this well in the middle of the day every day. I assure you this lady is still thinking about the water at the bottom of the well. Jesus' words, living water, was like offering indoor plumbing to someone who had no idea what indoor plumbing was. Most of us know this part. Jesus said, go get your husband. And with downcast eyes and through gritted teeth, she said, I don't have a husband. Jesus said, you're right when you say you have no husband. The fact is you've had 5 husbands, and the man you're with now is not your husband. What you have said is quite true. Now, if you were hoping at this point that I was going to make a big deal about her personal situation, brace yourself. I'm going to disappoint you. We need to set aside our 21st century American lens and look at this woman who lived in a time when individual rights was a foreign concept. No such thing. When women were little more than childbearing possessions, and they were subject to the plans or whims of their fathers and brothers and husbands. She may have cheated on 5 different husbands. I don't know. She may have been divorced by 5 guys who didn't like her cooking. Quite possible. She may have been caught up in this cycle and a victim of the law that said if a man dies without fathering his children, the next youngest brother is to marry the widow, which would make things at the Rockwell house quite interesting, wouldn't it? Think about that for a second. Okay, that's long enough. And I don't know if the man she's with is taking advantage of her or protecting her. But let's take another step back and consider that her multiple husbands, possibly her adultery, possibly their adultery, possibly hers, is a symbol of the story of her people who have been spiritual adulterers for 750 years or more. So like when any of us sense that the conversation is getting too close to home, she changes the subject. Sir, the woman said, you must be a prophet since you know all this. So tell me, why is it that you Jews insist that Jerusalem is the only place of worship while we Samaritans claim it is here on Mount Gerizim where our ancestors worshipped? This lady had enough sense to know that everybody couldn't be right on this topic. Jesus, God in the flesh, said to her, believe me, dear woman, the time is coming when it will no longer matter whether you worship the Father on this mountain or in Jerusalem. Full stop. He said, it will no longer matter whether you, the woman at the well, whether you worship at Gerizim or Jerusalem. I want you to see this. Jesus does not disqualify her from worship because she is a Samaritan. Jesus does not qualify her from worship because she is a woman. She may be misguided. She may be sinful, but she is not abandoned because the Son of God is there at the well saying, you will worship. Jesus continues. You Samaritans know very little about the one who you worship, while we Jews know all about him, for salvation comes through the Jews. But the time is coming, indeed it's here now, when true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. And her reality changed. And that's where I want to stop with the story. You can go home and read the rest. You can keep reading while I'm talking. I don't care. Spirit and in truth. And we want that to be the case. But I think sometimes because of our expectations of God, because of the way that we think things work, because of the reality of our own sins or the things that have been happening to us or the things that people have done to us, we forget about spirit and truth. So what does it mean to worship God in spirit? Deep inside of you. Deeper than your soul. Deeper than your heart. Inside of you, inside of me. We were created in God's image. And he placed spirit in us. And when we talk about worshiping in spirit, we talk about peeling away everything to get to spirit. And because God is spirit, somehow our spirit connects with him. That is worshiping in spirit. Worshiping in spirit and truth. Jesus is truth. Our circumstances, our reality is truth to us. So worshiping in spirit and in truth is taking the truth about me. My sin, my failure, my hang-ups, my distractions, my whatever, and setting that aside and saying, God, this is me. This is who I am. Here I am. That is worshiping in spirit and truth. Unfortunately, we have, in recent years, taken this word, worship, and we've used it to label a bunch of things that I don't think Jesus had in mind when he said worship in spirit and truth. We use that word to label a whole series of music genre. I don't think Jesus was thinking about music when he said worship in spirit and truth. Now, music is certainly used as part of our gathering to set an atmosphere for worship, but it's not worship music unless somebody's worshiping. We use worship to sometimes describe a portion of our gathering service, like the singing part, or the singing and praying and reading of responsive readings, and it's like anything that comes before the preaching is worship. Is it? I don't know. I mean, just because we're here in the room and we're doing things together, does it mean worship? I'll tell you when it means worship. When you or I or us peel through everything and take the kernel of God's image that is inside us and present it to God and say, my spirit, your spirit, God, please. And we look at him through the truth of Jesus, and he looks at us through the truth of Jesus, spirit and truth. It certainly can happen in a gathering like this on a Sunday morning. It can certainly happen while you're sitting in your chair at home. It can certainly happen when you're on a walk in the woods or in the street. I don't care where you walk. It can certainly happen whenever you feel the presence of the Holy Spirit, no matter where you are. And you say, this is an opportunity for me to say, my spirit, God, speak to me. God, I worship you for who you are. So as we go today, I want to encourage you to think about and then practice worship. Your spirit, God's spirit, the truth of Jesus, and how those things come together to create moments where the space between us and God's throne room grows very, very thin. So as we go, we're going to sing a song that we would normally sing at the beginning of a gathering like this. But as we go, I want to take an opportunity to present ourselves to God once again as people of spirit and truth, who want to be people of spirit and truth.